This is Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Quinn, K8QS.
And I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
We are otherwise known as the Dit and Duh brothers, and we're not going to tell you which of us is the duh, but you might think after this presentation that we're both way up there on the duh scale, because we are talking about nothing less than the 10 worst HF transceivers of all time. And nobody, right, Tom, other than Ham Radio Perspectives would dare to do this. And we expect to get a lot of nasty comments from some of you folks because we're going to mention your rig, your beloved rig, the rig you paid $1,000 for, and you have nursed along and fixed many, many times, and you keep it clean, and you even cover it up in between QSOs, and that rig is a piece of junk. But you wouldn't, but you would never tell that. You know, it's like buying a new car, Tom. You know, you're driving down the street with that new car and it's great. Somebody rolls down the window and says, "Hey, what do you think of that new thing?" Well, after 2 weeks, you know it's a piece of junk already, but you tell them, it's a beauty. It's a beauty. You know, it's a babe. And oh, boy. Yeah. So these are the 10 worst HF rigs of all time. And what we want to do here in part is to honor all of the engineers and the manufacturers who, under very difficult circumstances, lack of funds, a lack of time, mismanagement, whatever, made these turkeys. But they were trying their best, okay? So we don't mean to put them down. We don't mean to put anybody down. We want to have some fun on the channel. I've already gone too long with this. And Tom, you know that with every one of these rigs that we mention, there's going to be a group out there that is a fan of that. And they probably have a Facebook group, and they have worked for years, right? On fixing these things up and keeping them going.
That's kind of like confirmation bias. I got it. And no matter what you're going to tell me, I still love it.
And if it doesn't work well, we hams are a creative sort, and we will get it working right, and it'll be a great rig. And so if you did that with any of these, our hats are off to you, because you took a turkey and you ended up making that thing a delicious Thanksgiving dinner, and you give thanks for it.
Or you turned it into a toaster.
Yeah, right. All right, Tom, the number one, hit it.
Okay, the number one. Let's see. What could possibly be the number one?
You know what it is. We've nailed this sucker so many times.
All right. The number one, the all-time classic, is the Eico 753. The 753 or the 753. You know, widely considered the undisputed king of terrible vintage HF transceivers. This 1960s tri-band rig earned a permanent nickname, the 753. The flaw? The original tube-based VFO, the variable frequency oscillator, was incredibly sensitive to heat. As the radio warmed up, the frequency would drift radically across the band, kind of like drifting down the Ohio River on a raft, okay? If you breathe too hard near the chassis, your contact would have to chase your signal up and down the dial. The verdict? It was so notoriously unstable that even after Eico desperately released a solid-state VFO modification to fix it, the radio's reputation was permanently ruined. Quinn, I've heard that even under crystal control, it drifted. And we have here a user comment, a loyal Eico fan. Thanks to its well-known drifting characteristics, I was able to participate in different conversations almost at the same time on the same band. Pick it up, Quinn.
Oh, the Eico 750 Drifty 3. Ah, boy. A lot of us owned those things because they were so cheap. And the whole idea was you could get this thing going for almost nothing. And then we noticed the problem. But the irony in all of this, Tom, is that it drifted when it got hotter. Whereas most rigs back then stopped drifting. They stabilized when they got hotter. So this thing was a real perplexing one. All right, now here I know some people are going to be angry with our number 2, but listen up. Take it seriously, and then you can post your comments if you disagree with us. And we're trying to hit different categories of rigs here too. So number 2 is the Heathkit HW7. That's a small number, the HW7.
Right.
What we call DEF QRP rig. It was introduced in the early 70s. And this QRP rig, that is a low power rig. It was a little stinky low power thing. Transceiver, it's meant to be portable. You know, it's like with POTA today. You would think this would be the perfect thing to take out. And it would be a dream for budget conscious operators. Instead, it became a direct conversion. That was the type of receiver, direct conversion nightmare. The flaw was that the receiver architecture was famously deaf, meaning it lacked the sensitivity to hear anything except the strongest signals coming in. Well, one of my roommates in college had one of these, Tom. He was convinced there was something wrong with it that he could fix. He was an engineering student, and he had put that kit together perfectly. It was just a clunker on receive. Now, compounding the issue, and this is so funny, the chassis suffered from severe microphonics. Microphonics. Do you know what that is, Tom?
Oh, yeah. That's when you tap on the case or you tap on the desk, especially when you're sending CW.
And you hear it sounding like a bass drum, boom, 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 boom. Microphonics in your headphones. You had to use headphones with it, and it had finally, and to really put this thing to rest and why it should be up here in the top 10, it had zero defense against strong nearby AM broadcast stations bleeding through. So yes, the receiver worked sometimes, and it really worked. If you lived in Chicago like we did, WJJD, the country music station, was the one thing on AM that you could hear on 1140 or whatever that was. Man, it came through everything. So the verdict on this one, well, operators joked that it was a fine transmitter, as long as you didn't mind never hearing the person that you were replying to or communicating with. So that was a big problem with it. And unfortunately, we were not able to get a lot of comments on this to find a really good one for you. But one user comment is that with the direct conversion receiver, you could hear signals on both sides of the zero beat. So there you go.
All right. And number 3, Quinn, here's a classic that we both owned, thanks to me, selling to you, the ultimate, the unbelievable Night Kit T150 or the T150A, the Chirp and Drift Master. Now, technically an AMCW transmitter paired with a separate receiver rather than a unified transceiver. This 1960s Allied radio kit is legendary among operators for its spectral misbehavior.
Spectral misbehavior. There's a good term.
Spectral misbehavior. The flaw, Quinn, was the thermal design of the VFO was just, abysmal. Aside from the massive frequency drift, as it heated up, similar to the Eico 750 Drifty 3, its CW note didn't produce a clean note. It chirped so badly that operators described it as sounding like a dying bird. Furthermore, on AM phone, the voltage instability caused the signal to FM. Now, inadvertently shift frequency with the audio modulation. The verdict? Operating one was a guaranteed way to get your signal heavily criticized on the air or to receive an official FCC pink slip for rating messy harmonics out of the band. Our user comments, this is the only transmitter that I owned which earned me a pink ticket for out-of-band operations due to spurs or harmonics.
Yes, and these are honest quotes taken off of eHam where the reviews are, gang. So we're not making these up. But the fact is, yes, as you mentioned, Tom, you sold me one of these stinkers. I have never had a worse transmitter in my life. It was not just drift, Tom. If you touched that thing, it would move frequency. You know, if you looked at it sideways, if you leered at it and gave it a dirty look, that sucker would jump around on you. You know, it was like it was demonic. Terrible, terrible piece of gear. All right, here we go with the next one that's going to irritate some of you. Number 4 and the all-time worst HF transceivers is the Yaesu FT-480. You heard me right, the Yaesu FT-450. Did I say 450 or 480? 450.
You said 480.
I didn't mean that. I meant the 450. We're talking about the 450 here. The original garbage UX era. Now, before you jump in to defend this highly capable and corrected rig, you know, the FT-450D with a delta after it, the original non-D version of the FT-450 desktop HF transceiver launched in the late 2000s left a terrible impression in the whole market. Everybody said, stay away from that sucker. The flaw was it felt like Yaesu stripped away its legendary build quality to chase a budget price point. It featured a, whoa, listen to this. This is really objective. It featured a gaudy, intensely bright, and hard to read red display coupled with a highly non-intuitive, clunky menu system. I mean, we should give this thing the award, too, for one of the worst early menu systems, right? To make matters worse on this stinker, early users complained that the internal digital signal processing, DSP, felt sluggish and the receiver audio was harsh and exhausting to listen to for long periods. Okay, so what's the verdict on the Yaesu FT-450? A classic example of a major manufacturer, a well-regarded manufacturer, getting the user interface and ergonomic design completely wrong on the first try, and then realizing they had a problem, and then, bless their souls, fixing it up.
All righty. I got to get a lot of hate on that one, Gwen.
Yes.
Which brings us directly to number 5.
Well, this is good. Number 5, Tom, because nobody ever bought one of these.
And quite honestly, I've never owned one. So the Dentron HF-200A was the unstable solid state pioneer.
Okay, gang, I'm doing something here that we've never done in our videos before. I'm inserting this video that I'm just making now inside the video that Tom and I recorded earlier. Because when we were going through these, and I saw that one of the rigs we were going to really jump on as the worst HF rig ever, but there's not much information on it, and we couldn't find any pictures, is the Dentron HF-200A. And then it occurred to me, about 2 years ago, I bought one of these at a ham fest. I remember exactly what it looked like. I couldn't believe it. It was a small, very small radio transceiver. And I thought, what the heck? I didn't know much about it, but it was cheap. It had like 20 bucks on it. I asked the guy, did it work? He said he didn't know. So I bought it, brought it home, figured out what I needed for power for it, and I could not get it working. Very frustrating, but a cute little radio. So I didn't want to fiddle around with it anymore. I didn't have a manual for it. I didn't have a schematic. So I went ahead and said, maybe somebody wants this. Maybe they're collectors for this kind of equipment. So I put it on eBay saying, I don't think this thing works. And I got some phenomenal amount of money for it on eBay. I was hoping maybe I'd get my $20 back, and I got something like $250 or $300 for it. And that was the rig that I couldn't get working. Sometimes ham radio is stranger than you would think.
You know, Dentron was legendary for making incredible bulletproof antenna tuners, you know, like the Super Tuner and amplifiers. But their venture and foray into building an all-solid-state HF transceiver in the late 70s, nah, that did not go well. You know, the flaw as a relatively early attempt at an all-solid-state high-frequency rig, it was plagued by component instability. The VFO was an absolute drift master, you know, right up there with the Eico 753, requiring operators to open the radio up and swap out the factory FET transistors for better engineered alternatives, just to keep it from sliding off frequency. You know, the verdict on this is it proved that making great passive magnetic gear like tuners, amplifiers, does not automatically translate to mastering complex solid-state transceiver engineering.
Yeah, it's interesting that they went ahead after really creating such great equipment, including those tuners that people are still using, amplifiers, the old vacuum tube amplifiers of Dentron that they're still using. But that was a problem for them. Okay, number 6. Now we're moving in another direction with the Swan 250. The Swan 250, the 6-meter tube exploder. Yes, you heard that right. The 6-meter tube exploder. Now, let me first say that I owned a number of Swan transceivers for HF. Okay, I wouldn't buy a 6-meter rig, sole rig, but back in the day, you know, the HF transceivers generally didn't have 6 meters. Many of them didn't have 180 meters and so on. But Swan decided to get into this with the Swan 250. So in spite of these iconic, highly collectible HF rigs over the decades, like the 500C that I had and the 350, boy, that thing really sold a lot. The Swan 250, built specifically for 6 meters, gained a terrifying reputation in the 1960s. Okay, the flaw was that the radio relied on cheap television sweep tubes, the 6HF5S tube, in the power amplifier, and to push out high power on a high frequency. Now, Swan used a lot of these sweep tubes in the finals of their transceivers, but here they decided they were going to do this up at 50 megahertz. Okay, 6 meters is notoriously unforgiving, and if the operator didn't tune that rig perfectly, or if the SWR was slightly off, those cute little warm red sweep tubes would rapidly overheat, go into parasitic oscillation, and literally melt down or kaboom, explode. Hence the 256-meter tube exploder. Great engineering, guys. The verdict, it was a masterful, lightning fast tuning hand. Oh, it was great. I love tuning the Swan equipment. But if you hesitated for more than a few seconds during tune-up, if you couldn't tune up that sucker like that, you were in for shopping for incredibly expensive replacement tubes if you could get them. And in some cases, you might just take that rig to the Hamfest and say, everything works, just needs new tubes. Or if that didn't work, take it out to the Hamfest, put it on the ground, call everybody around, take a hatchet and hit that sucker again and again and again to get rid of all of your anger. There you go, the Swan 250, our number 6 in the all-time 10 turkey transceivers.
And following that up, number 7 is the Yaesu FTDX 3000, the startled squirrel automatic gain control. A modern addition that splits opinions. While it boasts a clean receiver on paper, many operators who use the FTDX 3000 in heavy contest environments or, dense urban areas grew to detest its practical performance. The flaw was that the automatic gain control, the AGC firmware, was infamously twitchy. Hams joked that if a neighbor flipped the light switch on or a moderate static crash occurred nearby, the AGC would clamp down like a startled squirrel, rendering the operator completely deaf for several seconds while the radio slowly recovered. The verdict for a mid-tier desktop radio that took up substantial desk space, forcing users into a massive 200-option menu just to adjust basic functionality, all driven by a severely underspec'd internal processor, made the operating experience, it's incredibly tedious.
Yet there will be fans of the rig out there. Be kind. We're talking in generalizations. If you got one of these and you really fixed it up and it's working like a dream for you, post a note below. In fact, put a picture too. We'd love to see you getting a 5.9 signal report, to the extent that a 5.9 signal report means anything anymore. All right, number 8 in our all-time turkey-worky HF transceivers. We're going to another company now. We're trying to spread out the blame, right? The MFJ 9420. The MFJ 9420, you probably even haven't heard of this thing. It's part of their travel radio series, all right? This one is the solder blob roulette. The solder blob roulette. MFJ is a staple, or was a staple, of the ham radio world, famous for making affordable gear and accessories and all. We did a whole video here, and I'll link to it on why we miss MFJ. However, this 20-meter travel QRP tech from the 90s and 2000s highlighted the absolute worst of their notorious quality control production issues. It was bad. Something happened there. Who knows it? Where they sent them out to be made, or what was going on with the staff? If they were smoking stuff they shouldn't have been smoking when they were making them, or who knows what. The flaw, while the schematic designs were actually brilliant, the physical execution was a disaster. Hams buying these rigs, brand new, frequently reported receiving units with cold solder joints, missing internal hardware, or misaligned inductors straight out of the box. So what's the verdict here on the old MFJ? Well, it gave rise to the community joke that MFJ stood for missing for June, or more fix-it jobs, or mighty fine junk, all of these things. You didn't buy an MFJ radio to operate it. You bought it as a kit that happened to come pre-assembled incorrectly. and that takes work to guarantee that. Okay, Tom, it's all yours.
Okay, number 9. And this one's going way, way back, Quinn. I mean, I remember seeing these at the Ham Fest back in the 60s. It was the Gonset G76. Probably most hams never heard about it, but it was the mobile power supply nightmare. The Gonset G76 from the early 1960s was an ambitious multi-band AM and CW transceiver designed for use as a mobile rig in a vehicle or as a compact bus station. The flaw, the radio itself was decent, but it relied on an external, incredibly complex multi-voltage power supply. The DC power supplies designed for vehicles were wildly unreliable, prone to burning out vibrators and transistors, and generated massive electrical noise that completely wiped out the receiver. If you ran it in the house, the matching AC supply ran hot enough to fry an egg. Quinn, I had a rig similar to this with a vibrator supply. And honestly, that vibrator made more noise than the audio on the radio cranked all the way up. You had this vibrator inside the power supply that created an AC voltage from the 12-volt DC car voltage, and then stepped it up, to what, 250 volts or so for the plate currents on the transceiver. Incredibly noisy. And the verdict is, the engineering required to supply the massive disparate voltages to both the tubes and the early solid-state control circuits made the rig a logistical and really a maintenance nightmare. I remember when you could go into the drugstore where they have the tube testing machine. Yeah, you could buy the vibrators too, because those burned out faster than the tubes did.
Oh, you got me. I don't remember. And then selling the vibrators as well. Oh, so this thing was a maintenance nightmare, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And it was big, clunky, probably weighed about 20 pounds. I had one barely fit under the dash of a 62 Chevy Impala. So, yeah, it was big and it was loud.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. Let's get on to number 10 here in our tour through ham radio history, looking at the worst HF transceivers. Now, this one, I think, is fairly deserved, and practically everybody would agree. And it really gave a bad rap to the manufacturer early on, which they have since gotten away from. And this is the ultra cheap Xiegu X1M. X1M. This is the early Chinese HF attempt, or one of the earliest Chinese HF attempts, okay? Before companies like Xiegu figured out how to build excellent modern QRP rigs, like, let's say, the X6100 is a good one. The G90, the G90 is a terrific rig. They released some early entry-level backpacker radios in the early 2010s, I believe, like the X1M. The flaw, the internal filtering was practically non-existent. The spectral output was so dirty that it frequently blasted spurious emissions and harmonics all over adjacent bands. The rotary encoder used for tuning was incredibly cheap, often skipping steps or tuning backwards when you were trying to go forwards. And the receiver audio had a permanent internal digital whine to it, like a kid whining. You don't want that. It was caused by poor shielding between the processor and the audio amplifier. So Xiegu was going to get into this. They saw POTA rising, and and that market is big, but boy, did they blow it with that X1M. It never should have gone to market, in our opinion. Now, the verdict, it was cheap. In fact, it was so cheap that it would tempt new hams into HF. But its spectral impurity made it a hazard to the airwaves, and its clunky build quality made it a chore to operate. So here's one comment from a user of this radio from eHam. Just everything about this radio's external appearance and functionality felt cheap, poorly assembled, and unlikely to survive daily use. Well, you don't want that kind of review. No. So we've been looking at, we've picked out 10 rigs that have had notoriously bad reputations. Not for everybody, but in the ham community, you pick up a rep, and that rep becomes a bad rap. And so we looked at some of these, many of them that we have struggled with, but we did not keep. We took to Hamfest and said, at a very low price, as is. So that's the only fair way that we could sell those. I don't know what I ever did with the T150 I bought from you. I don't think I sold it. I think I did take a hatchet to it. But in any case, thanks for staying around with us. This is all meant to be fun. For those of you who have taken these rigs and fixed them up and really gotten them working, we're proud of you. So this is Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Quinn, K8QS.
I'm Tom, WA9 TDD.
Keep looking for good equipment, and on the old stuff, fix it up. 73.